Welcome to the Jericho Force Podcast, where we learn how to integrate faith into the work that we do. Don't conform to the world's way of doing business. Transform by doing business God's way. Here's our host, my husband, author, speaker, teacher, encourager, and stewardship coach, Jason Davis.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify, and welcome to another episode of the Jericho Force Podcast, where we talk about how we can integrate faith into the work that we do, how we live out our faith in the marketplace. I am really excited for this next episode of the Jericho Force Podcast because this is someone that I look up to, and his books has had a great impact on my life. And I took a step of faith, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, because you just never know how God brings people together. But before I bring this individual on, let me introduce him to you. And that individual is James C. Hunter. In addition to the culture, creating excellence with those you lead, Jim Hunter is the author of two other internationally best-selling books, The Servant, a simple story about the true essence of leadership, and the world's most powerful leadership principle, How to Become a Servant Leader. His books serve as texts in many MBA and other higher education curricula around the world, are translated into dozens of languages, and have sold over 5.5 million copies worldwide. For over 30 years, Jim has been a sought-after public speaker to audiences around the world on leadership and developing high-performing teams. He also assists organizations in creating a culture of excellence by growing leaders and building community. His clients include many of the world's most admired organizations, including the FBI, American Express, Johnson & Johnson, Marriott, Nestlé, Procter Gamble, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and all four branches of the United States military. Jim resides in Michigan with his wife Denise and daughter Rachel. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Jericho Force Podcast, Mr. Jim Hunter. Jim?
Thank you for having me, Jason. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. How are you doing today, sir?
Better than I deserve, I'll tell you. I feel very blessed these days. You know, this pandemic has been a rough thing for people that do what I do, public speaking and live events. And I just thank God I'm at a point in my life where, it's the financial end is not important like it used to be when I was, kids in college and building a house and all the stuff you do when you're younger. And so just feeling very blessed that because there's a lot of younger people that do what I do that have been devastated by this pandemic. And so I'm feeling very blessed. And now it's opening up again, and I'm getting out there a lot again. And so I feel very blessed. That's the best answer for your question, Jason.
Amen to that, Jim. Certainly appreciate your transparency, sharing what's been going on. And we know that a lot of people have dealt with a lot throughout these last 2.5 years, and even to a certain extent, a little bit of lingering. But like you said, things are starting to open up a little bit more, and it is good to see people starting to put on conferences and summits again, and people hitting the road a little bit.
Yes, no question about it.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, there's a lot in your bio there, and God has graced you to do a lot of things. But Jim, we know you just didn't roll out of bed and become a best-selling author and this impactful speaker. So take us on a journey. Talk to us about how you've reached the point you have in your career and where you are today.
Yes. Well, in terms of the career side, I'll start there. Well, let me start on the personal side. I was raised in a traditional Lutheran type church, but faith was not really a very important thing in our family. I was confirmed as a Lutheran in 8th grade, and to be honest with you, I thought that meant once I was confirmed, I didn't have to go to church anymore. I thought that was a good thing, and And so faith was never really an integral part of our family or myself. But and by the time I got to college, I was pretty well sowing my wild oats. I was into a lot of stuff I shouldn't have been into, and even pushing drugs out of my dorm room at the time. And I flunked out of college after 2 years, and had some wilderness years for sure. And I would consider myself pretty much a hardcore atheist at that point. But then I ended up going back to college a little bit later, and was in a community college and took a philosophy class. And the professor was absolutely an atheist. And he was talking about evidences for God. And he mentioned Aquinas' first cause theory, that anything that begins to exist has a cause. So if you take it all the way back, what was the first cause, right? Mm-hmm. And I was probably high that day, because I usually was for my classes. And, for the first time, it dawned on me, what got everything going? I'm right. The universe began to exist. So what made the universe begin, right? And for all of a sudden, God became possible. I thought, my gosh, it just rocked my world. So for the next, many years, dozen years, I didn't have a Damascus experience, but for many years after, I slowly and by the time I was 30, I was pretty well entrenched in my faith again, and it's continued ever since for the next 30 years. It's grown, it continues to grow and get stronger, and it's just now the biggest part of my life and my family's life, and so it's been a journey, no question about it. But my professional career, after I had flunked out of college, ended up going back. I graduated at age, I think I was 25, and my first kind of business job was as an HR director in a steel company in Detroit, where I'm from. I'm from Detroit. And so I just started working with people and working with a lot of supervisors, and just was around a lot of bad leaders, really bad leaders, and a few good ones. But I just paid attention to what worked and what didn't work. And over time, it began to dawn on me, what works is the leaders that serve their people. And that kind of dovetailed with my faith journey, where Jesus, he was a pretty good leader. If leadership is influence, which it is, nobody has influenced more people than Jesus. There's not even a close second. Yeah. A third of the planet calls themselves Jesus. 2.3 billion with a B, far and away the largest faith system on planet Earth. The next largest, Islam, is half the size of Christianity, and even the Muslims call Jesus a great prophet. So this guy had tremendous influence, and most countries around the world have national holidays based on events in his life, and our very time is divided, 2022, from the number of years since he lived. So nobody can deny, no intellectually honest person can deny, this guy left a mark. This guy had a lot of influence. And it dawned on me, years ago, I need to take a look at what he had to say about leadership. And he said to lead is to serve. Mm-hmm. And, here it is 2,000 years later, Jason, and we're still trying to get our arms around what he meant by that. Right. What does it mean to serve? But I knew it was right. In my heart, I knew it was right. And I watched the great leaders growing up. And in early days of my business career, that the ones that were effective were the ones that took care of their people. The ones that served, the ones that identified and met the needs of their people. Interestingly, though, they weren't soft. Being a servant isn't about being a slave. It isn't about doing what people want. It's about doing what people need. And there is a tremendous distinction between those two terms. And what my children want is way different than what my children need. Mm-hmm. And what my employees want, way different than what my employees may need a kick in the pants today desperately. And they need to raise their game desperately. And Jesus never hesitated to do that too, right? He could be very, very direct.
Yes, those red letters.
Oh my gosh, he could be very direct. So, it just dawned on me, this is the right way to lead. And so then I wrote a book about it in the late 90s, and about 25 years ago, and which I just, I still don't think of myself as a writer. I teach. That's what I do. And I just wrote this book as kind of a memoir for my daughter. She was 2 at the time, and it was just meant to be put into her baby, but just so she knew what I believed. I really never dreamed it would be published, because it's just common sense, right? It's just doing the right thing with people. It's a very common sense notion. And I thought, who would publish? I mean, it's just doing the right thing, treating people the way treating people the way they should be treated. That's all it is. But I guess common sense isn't so common, right? And the book really took off, and it could absolutely change my life in pretty much every way, and my family's life every way possible. So it's been an interesting journey, Jason.
I believe that, Jim, with everything you've been saying. Wow, what a journey, and God has had his hand on that journey the whole time. You know, Jim, you talked about starting out in HR and recognizing that those people who are really impactful, they were servants first. A lot of times, Jim, HR, they kind of get a bad rep of having their own agenda. But when you worked in HR, what were some of the patterns you noticed? Obviously, the people who served really had the most impact. But what were some other patterns you recognized working with people at that time?
Yeah. Interestingly, I think HR gets a reputation that they kind of deserve. I mean, it's really kind of sad because HR, they're supposed to be taking care of the people, right? It's people department, and unfortunately, a lot of HR people, in my experience, don't understand that. That their job is to take care of the people, identify and meet the needs of the people. And they just don't get that. And it's unfortunate. But when I took my job in HR, I was completely clueless. I worked for a company that was kind of a flannel shirt. They built it up from the dirt. We had about, 300-400 people. And when I started my job, they literally didn't even know what an HR person did.
Oh, wow.
I started my job with a desk and a pencil, and they said, figure it out. They literally had no idea. It was a grassroots business. That's just how they built the entire business. And so that was actually good because I was able to really take some time and pray about what is my role here. But interestingly, one of my first days on the job, my mentor, Phil Hoffman, he just passed away recently. He was one of the greatest servant leaders I ever met. And he taught me a lot. And my first week on the job, he took me out in the plant, the factory, and he put me up on a bunch of skids, and I'm standing there talking to 300, mostly men. Pretty tough environment, hot, dirty, swing shifts, tough environment. And he said, introduce yourself. So I said, my name is Jim Hunter, and I'm the new HR guy, and just want you all to know I got an open door policy. Anytime you need anything, you come see me. Thank you. So I'm walking back to the office with Phil, and he looked at me and he said, Jim, I don't ever want to hear those words come out of your mouth again. And I said, what? I was taken aback. I said, I thought that was pretty progressive. This is 1980 in Detroit and talking about an open door. That's not the way people led in Detroit in 1980. Let me tell you, it was a tough move. Still is kind of messed up. But I thought that was pretty progressive, right? Yeah. He said, listen to how arrogant that is. You're going to sit in your throne room up there in your office, and people are going to come in and kiss your ring, and you're going to give them what they need. Ooh. That's the most arrogant thing I've ever heard, Jim. He said, your job is to get your butt out there in that plant and find out what they need. Your job is to serve them. There's men in this plant who will never come to your office. Probably about half of this building will never cross your throne room. So you got to need who's serving who here, Jim.
Wow. Your
job is to take care of them, meet their needs. That's why you're here. They're your customers. I'll tell you what, I was mad at Phil for about a week after that. But I'll tell you what, it taught me a powerful lesson. And after that, I understood who's serving who here. And I knew that my job was to get out there and find out what people need. The tools, the training, the materials, the mission, the margin, the rules of the house, the hugging, the spanking, the coaching, helping them, giving them everything they need to create excellence in that plant. And It was one of the best lessons I ever learned.
Wow. Ooh, Jim, that was powerful right there. What a great mentor. As you think back to that, Jim, about, hey, come out of the ivory tower and come amongst the people, and you touch on leadership being influence. When you're among the people that way and there's a feedback loop, what aspect of leadership is that really getting into, the feedback loop that you have with people so that you can serve? When people are doing that, what type of foundation is that laying?
Yeah, for me, Jason, the feedback loop is just synonymous with relationship. It starts with relationship. It starts and finishes. It's all about people. It's all about relationships. It's all about connections, emotional connections with people. And, Herb Kelleher, who was the founder of Southwest Airlines, and he was a great servant leader. He built that airline on servant leadership, and he was very serious about it. He used to say the business of business is people. Without people, man, there ain't no business. It's just brick and mortar and funny looking equipment.
Right.
And people are relational. That's how they roll, right? And people say to me, well, I'm not good at that relationship thing. And I said, well, if you want to be an effective leader, you better start practicing. You better get good at that. Because that's how you influence people, right? We have to have a relationship first. I mean, when I first meet you, Jason, we have kind of a neutral account. I don't really know you, but as that relationship develops, can I trust you? Mm-hmm. Are you committed? Are you in? Do you care about me? Or is this just about you, right? We're developing a relationship, and I'm answering those questions all the time. And we're making deposits in these relationship accounts, or we're taking withdrawals, right? But at any point in time, we have a bank balance, you and I. And if I don't have a healthy balance, I'm not going to have much influence with you. That's the bottom line. So my job is to make sure I'm building that account with you, right? I'm building trust. I'm building, that you and I are taking laps together. A couple times a month, I'm throwing a coffee at you saying, let's go, let's take a lap around the building. What's going good for you, Jason?
Yeah.
What's not going good? What pisses you off in this department? What could we do better? How could I do better as your supervisor? How's that sick kid of yours? How can I help? Right?
Yeah.
And after we do that for a few months, now you're starting to get the idea, hey, man, I can trust this guy. He's committed. He's in. And he cares about me. Right? Once you've answered those three questions, Jason, can I trust you? Are you committed? Do you care about me? Now you're starting to think, how can I make Jim Hunter look good? Right?
Yeah.
I want that's a leader I can follow. We now have relationship. Now you're thinking about how can you help me? Because I'm all about helping you. I want you to be the best you can be, and you want me to be the best I can be. Now we've established something.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the model that really came from Jesus. When he sent the disciples out, he said, first, build a relationship. Go into the home, sit, eat with them, establish a relationship. You don't be preaching the gospel first.
Right.
We don't have a relationship. Build that relationship first. You got to have a foundation. Right. And so great leaders understand that principle, and they're constantly looking for opportunities to build and make deposits. You don't want to have a low relational balance with people, because sometimes you got to win and make a withdrawal. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm your leader, Jason, every now and then I'm going to have to go in and we're going to have a conversation about a gap. Right. Yeah. Jason, here's our standard. Here's your performance. We got a little gap here, dude. And if this continues, I'm going to have to escalate because I need you playing above the rim.
Yeah.
Now, if we don't have a good relationship, how do you think that conversation is going to go? If you don't think you can trust me, you don't think I'm committed, you don't think I care about you, it's probably not going to go well.
Yeah.
But if we have built something, right, and you can trust me, and I'm committed because you see how I roll every day, and I care about you. I've demonstrated that over months. Now we're going to have a gap discussion. How do you think that's going to go? I mean, we've increased the likelihood of a very constructive conversation probably tenfold, right?
Yes, we have. Wow.
That's the power of relationship. So if you want to be an effective leader, man, you got to get good at relationships. And that's that's what leadership development is, man. Practicing, getting good at that. You weren't born with that.
Right.
I never met a 2-year-old that was good at it. That was patient and kind and listened and, oh man, they're little tyrants. This is a skill that you develop in your life. It's part of your character, right? Building relationships with people. And so leadership development and character development, that's one and the same thing. You want to be a better leader? You got to work on your character. Got to work on your relationships. Wow. Yeah.
That's huge, Jim. Basically becoming a better person. Yes. Really. And I love what you said earlier. You reminded me of that quote, people don't care what you know unless they know that you care. That's what you...
that's good.
What you reminded me of earlier. My gosh. Jim, as you started to get into leadership principles, you talked about how you think of yourself more as a teacher who just happened to have written books, and God blessed those books.
He did.
A teacher who taught and teaches, right? And God put his hand on those books. So talk to us about your book. So the one that I read, and folks, I strongly encourage you to, the one that connected me first to Jim was The Servant. So Jim, talk about just the origin of that book and what you expect people to get out of reading that.
The Servant. Yeah, that was just a download from God. I'll tell you, it literally. And I didn't used to really believe in that stuff, that God downloads stuff like that, but I believe it now.
Wow.
He, as I said to you, it was meant to be just kind of a thing for my daughter. I think I was having a midlife crisis. I was in my early 40s, and my daughter was 2. And I was thinking, boy, if I had a heart attack or got hit by a bus, she would really never know what I teach or what I believe and what I've learned about serving and servant leadership. So that was the purpose. And I knew what I wanted to write, but I didn't just want to write a boring business book. There's just too many of those out there anyway. I wanted to put it in a story. And because Jesus taught in parables, and it's a great way to teach, because everybody can relate to characters in a book, and everybody can relate to a story. And you can, put yourself in there. But I couldn't think of a context for the story. And as God would have it, my next door neighbor and I were talking about this, and he was giving me some ideas. In fact, he was the one that really encouraged me to write the book. But just prior to us having a conversation, my wife was watching Oprah. Remember the old Oprah Winfrey show?
Yep.
And Oprah was interviewing executives who would go away for retreats. They would go and climb mountains or swim oceans, there was this one that went to a monastery, and a monk took him under his wing and taught him some things. And I told my next door neighbor that, and he said, well, man, you ought to go see Simeon down at St. Meinrad Monastery. And I said, well, who's Simeon? He said, well, that's my great uncle. He's been there since he was an orphan, and he's been there since he was 4 years old. And he's in his 80s now, and he's a Franciscan monk, and he's been in this monastery for all these years, 80 years. And you got to go down there and just get a feel for that environment. So I went down there, and he welcomed me, and I spent a week at this. Actually, it was a Benedictine monastery.
Oh, wow.
And he took me under his wing, and I learned the ropes of what that's about, and that became the foundation of the story, The Servant. So all the backdrop parts of The Servant, even though the story is a fiction, it's an allegory. Mm-hmm. All the background things about how monasteries operate, that's all accurate. That's how I lived there for that week. And so I just kind of blended these principles into the story, the servant leadership principles, and I sent it off to a publisher, and nobody was more surprised than me when they accepted it. And it was slow at first, but it just started to build momentum, and nationally, and then internationally, and it just, by 2005, after about 5 years, it was pretty much internationally pretty well known. It just changed my life. And what, ironically, even today, in the United States, it's selling more today than it's ever sold.
Wow.
And then the publishers don't understand it at all. I mean, they never put it in softcover because it's selling still so strongly in hardcover. Most books are put into softcover after a year, 6 to 12 months. They put it in softcover, but The Servant's never been in softcover, and it's because it's been such a strong seller for so many years, and the publishers just don't understand it, and I don't either. Well, my wife puts it this way: if you can explain it, God didn't do it. Ooh. Right? So it's just been a God thing from start to finish. I wrote The Servant in 6 weeks.
Wow.
To give you perspective on that, my second book took 6 years.
Oh, gee.
My third book took another 10 years. And now I'm working on my last one, my fourth one, and I'm probably at least 5 years into this one. But that first one, The Servant, 6 weeks, it poured out. And that was just a download. And I don't know, it's just been an amazing ride.
My God, Jim. I agree with you on the download part. I've had those before, so I'm right there with you, brother. I am right there with you. And I know when I was reading it, that's what I was getting downloads out of just being a reader, so it had a profound effect on me. My gosh. Jim, you talked about the time lapse of how long it took to write certain books. So that was The Servant. What about your second book? And I apologize if it's out of chronological order, but talk to us about your other book, The Culture.
Yes. Well, let me first just back up with the second book. After The Servant was out for about a few years, I was getting all this correspondence from around the world, lots of emails. And people were saying, Jim, nice book. Thank you. But you missed it, man. You missed it, dude. I liked your book. I handed it out to all my people. They liked your book. All my supervisors, they liked your book. They got excited. But you know what? They're still crazy like they were before. You missed the main thing, Jim. How do you get it into your game? Right? Oh, okay. You're laying out some great principles, and everybody agrees with it, man. It's apple pie and the flag. Which part do you disagree with? Nobody wants to work for a jerk. Nobody wants to work for a boss hole, right?
Yep.
Nobody wants their kid to marry somebody who's toxic.
Yep.
Nobody, right? Everybody wants somebody who has self-control, is kind, who's humble, respectful, selfless, forgiving, honest, committed. I mean, who's going to disagree with that stuff? But you missed the point, Jim. I got 10 crazy supervisors. I told them to read your book, and they read your book. They liked it, but they're still crazy. How do we help people to get it from here, their head, into their heart, and from their heart into their actions? Yeah. Head to heart, heart to habit. If we can't get it into our game, it's just information, right? How do we help people change?
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what I do. I mean, a big part of my business is helping people understand the principles of servant leadership, which is what the book The Servant is about. But probably a more important aspect of what I do is now, once we understand it, that high bar of servant leadership, I need to identify the gaps between where I am and where I need to be. I need some good data. And then I need to get after it. I got to eliminate the gap, right? I got to grow. I got to get better. I can't improve unless I change. So creating the friction necessary to help people change. And so that's a big part of what our business is to not only teach, but get people some good feedback, some good data about how they're doing against that high standard, and then create a little friction where we got to get after our stuff and get better, right? So, for example, Jason, let's say you get some feedback and your people say, yeah, you're a nice guy, but you never hold anybody accountable, right?
Yeah.
You're a wimp. You're a nice guy, but you're pretty wimpy. And so there's a lot of mediocrity going on in this building and in your department. What are you going to do about that, Jason?
Right.
So, and that's where we come in. I said, Jason, man, you're a nice guy. It sounds like you got a bad habit, right? If you don't, what you're doing is you're not telling people the truth.
Yeah.
You're pretending everything's okay and it's not okay. And your A players, your superstars in your department, they drive home at night wondering how come you're not doing your job. Mm. It really makes them mad that you allow this mediocrity. Right. Because they want to be part of something special. So what are you going to do about that? Right? You can fix that. I've watched people fix that for 30 years. Yep. But you're going to have to get focused. You're going to have to get laser focused. And you're going to need a lot of feedback. And I'm going to put a burr in your saddle. Right? And we're going to be asking a lot. Right? We got to get you practicing some new habits. You got a bad one. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. So that's what the second book was about. That whole process. It's more of a business type book. That kind of gives people the steps that we use to help them lay the foundation, get the feedback, create some friction. We call that the 3 Fs: foundation, feedback, friction. So that was in the early 2000, probably about 2005. That one came out, and then this last one about 5 years ago, the culture was a return to the monastery. Where they all go back, the participants go back, and they start talking about culture. Everybody's talking about culture these days. Yeah. And how we create a culture of excellence with great leadership and great community, great togetherness, right? How we roll as a team. And that's a process, and it doesn't happen just showing up. You got to be intentional. The great companies, the great organizations, the great cultures are very intentional about it. Yes, so that's what the culture was about, and getting intentional. And so when they go back to the monastery for the second time, this is what Simeon teaches them about culture and how to grow leaders and build community.
Wow. I love that breakdown, Jim. So folks, if you're listening to Jim, you see how these books work in unison and how they can help you both personally and professionally. Jim, I thought about that as you were saying it, and you started to talk about how you work with your clients in different companies. As we come out of the pandemic, Jim, and as you've been getting back on the road, back on the plane again, how can we better lead coming out of what we've been through the last 2.5 years? How can we lead and serve better in this time?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jason. The logarithm is the algorithm is still the same. It's always the same. It's relationships. It's people, right? But never more important than now. I mean, people are really. We haven't even begun to understand the effect of people being holed up in their apartments and homes. And my daughter teaches second grade in an inner city school in Detroit, and I'll tell you what, man, we haven't even begun to understand the impact of people locked up in their buildings. And never more than now has this relationship thing and getting into people's space and talking and helping never been more important. So the algorithm is still the same. You got to build relationships with your people, and it can be done very well on Zoom. Right. Thankfully, we're able to get together now, and that's great, but it can be done very well on Zoom. I've been amazed at there's exercises we do, community building exercises we do with companies on Zoom. If you would have told me pre-pandemic that it could be effective on a virtual platform, I would have told you you're crazy, but I've been wrong. I've been totally wrong. It can be done very effectively. You just got to know how to go about it, and how to ask the right questions, and how to probe a little bit and make connections and ask questions, right? Open-ended questions. And it's really pretty easy. I tell supervisors this all the time. I call it the 5 W's. You got to ask questions that can't be answered with yes or no. It's like your teenager. Where'd you go? Nowhere. What'd you do? Nothing. You haven't learned anything, right? You got to ask questions that can't be answered with yes or no, open-ended questions. So, like, what's going well for you? Yeah. Jason, what's going well? Let's assume there's a couple things going well in everybody's life. Everybody can usually point to a couple things. All right. So what's going well, Jason? And then what's not going well? Right? Let's talk about that. What's not going well for you right now? And, the first month, the second month, you might be a little tentative, but as time goes on, you're going to start seeing, maybe this Hunter guy's safe. You really want to know? You really want to know how I'm doing? And it builds, right? Right. Third question, what are you doing to get better? What are you doing to work on your game? What are you learning? How you doing? You feel like you're growing? Fourth question, what do you think I could do better as your supervisor? What are you working on? What do you think I need to work on? How could I get better? How could I support you better? You getting enough FaceTime with me? Right? Fifth question, how can I help? It's one of the great servant leadership questions. I teach my audiences this all the time. Get good at asking that question. How can I help? Right? I get young kids and students, junior high school kids. See, I'm teaching servant leadership to them. They say, "Well, what can I do to get ready to be a servant leader when I grow up?" I say, "Go home and ask, how can I help?" Go ask your mom and dad to get really good at that. Right? Get that servant spirit, and it takes practice. Right? You weren't born with it. You did not have a servant spirit at age 2. Trust me, you did not. It's all about me. Then, right? So
it's true.
So leadership is about growing up, man. You got to get your eyes off yourself. Get your eyes on the ball. The ball ain't you.
Yeah.
And you got to, Maya Angelou said, most people never grow up. They just grow old.
Ooh.
And that's sad. And so you got to get leadership is being other focused. It's not about you. Right? Not about your inner child and how you're going to be taken. No. You take care of other people and your inner child will be just fine. Right? You'll be just fine. You get other focused and that it takes practice.
Yeah.
Right? You can believe all this stuff, Jason, but until you jump in the swimming pool, until you get in the gym of life, you got opportunities every day to serve, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by the friction. That's what we do with people. So, okay, Jason, you don't appreciate people or you don't listen? That's a really bad habit, dude. What are you going to do about it? You think you could do it 2 times this week? You think you could find 2 people that you could give sincere, specific appreciation to? And you're thinking, well, yeah, I could do 2. All right, let's start there. Do 2. I want you to write it down because I'm going to ask you Monday what you did. Then next week, we're going to work on 3. Right? We're just going to start working this thing. Even if you got to fake it to make it, man, we're going to get you in the gym.
Yeah.
You don't hold people accountable? Bad habit, dude. What are you going to do about it? Do you think you could do 1 next month? Oh, yeah, I could do 1. Have 1 crucial conversation with somebody on your team where you're honest about these gaps. You think you could do that? Oh, yeah, I could do 1. All right. What day are you going to do that? And I want you to call me at the end of the day and let me know how that went.
Yeah.
That's the kind of friction we create. You got to get people in the gym.
Yep.
You build character by your behavior, right? You got to practice these things.
Wow, that's good, Jim. Jim saying get people in the gym. I love it.
Right. Got to get in the gym.
Wow. Well, Jim, you gave us you painted such a great picture about, let's not just talk about it. Let's go do something about it. And being selfless instead of selfish.
Yes.
And like you said, we don't come out of the womb that way. Yeah. It's got to be learned behavior over
That's
time.
Correct.
I love that. Well,
that's correct.
Jim, as we move forward in 2022, we're coming almost mid-year. What are you excited about? What's next for Jim Hunter in 2022 and going forward?
Yes, well, I'm excited to be live again with a lot of groups. I think I've got 7 events in the next 30 days, and which is just great. Live events. I'm leaving here in a little bit for one, and that's exciting to me to be able to get live with people again. And I've had a few over the last month, and I'll tell you, people are so excited to be in the same room together again. Mm-hmm. It's palpable. I mean, it's you can feel it. I mean, I was with an Army group last week down in San Antonio, 200 colonels and generals. Wow. They had not been together for 2.5 years. Literally. They work on the same base in the same area. They'd not been together. And when we got together for this event live, I mean, you could just feel it in the air, how excited they were to press the flesh, right? And connect. So that's really exciting to be back at that. So let's hope we don't get another strain of COVID coming down the road, because We don't need that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that, but I'm also excited about my fourth book, and I think this will probably be my last one. But it's going to be the final return to the monastery. It's the end of the trilogy that started with the servant, and they go back. But this is going to be a spiritual book. It's going to be the first two books are. I have to be a little careful with my business audiences how much spiritual things I put in because people are so sensitive these days.
Sure.
But this fourth one, I'm just going to this last one, the trilogy, the third one. I'm just going to go for it, and it's the main character, the protagonist, John. He's finally got his act together. He's a pretty good dad. He's a pretty good boss. A pretty good human being. He's got his character game going. He's learning how to serve his people. He's getting pretty good at this stuff. But he gets cancer, and he's got stage 4 melanoma, and he's in hospice 6 months, and he's 50. And the wheels come off. He has such anxiety. He has no spiritual anchor. He's just adrift, and he's so bad he can't even drive. I mean, he just has such anxiety. And so he calls Simeon up there at the monastery, and he says, can I come see you? Because I'm a wreck. I need some help. The wheels are coming off. The wheels are off. So he travels back up to the monastery for a weekend with Simeon, and Simeon invites all the other participants that were in the servant, and they surprise him up there, and they all meet, the 7 of them, around the campfire. And Simeon teaches spiritual truths about life and about the secret sauce of an abundant life, because he's demonstrated it for the participants over a period of years. This is their 3rd retreat. And he talks about worldview and talks about Christianity and is it true? And if, like C.S. Lewis said, if it is, there's nothing more important, right? Nothing more important than this. So is it true? What's the evidence that it's true? And so around the campfire, we got a couple atheists and a New Ager and a Hindu and the Bible thumping Baptist. And so they go at it, right? It's not going to go down easy, but they're going to wrestle with it just like they did with leadership. They're going to wrestle with spiritual truths. But John, the protagonist, he's listening. He needs some help. So Simeon's going to download the abundant life and abiding and what it means to live a Christ-centered life.
Wow, that's good, Jim. I can tell you I'm already excited about that, and it's not even out yet, Jim. So I look forward to that. And you're right, it's so good to be back in person with live events, and there is a new energy that has been missed. So I'm really excited about your upcoming schedule and that book for sure. So Jim, as we come to a close here, you've given so much value. You've given so many lessons, gold nuggets. You gave us some friction on some stuff we could do today, right now. Because, folks, Jim, he may even ask you about it. We're not even on air. He has that much friction. There's going to be a little voice in your head saying, "Hey, what are you going to do about it?" And give me a call.
That's right.
You've done all that for us, Jim. How can people stay in touch with you, follow you, reach out? What's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, probably jameshunter.com. That's at the website, and pretty much everything you would need to connect or see some of the stuff I'm doing. I think I got some videos on there. Anything that they need would be there. jameshunter.com. Awesome.
Well, folks, the Jim Hunter came and served. Speaking of serving, he came and served us with some leadership nuggets and some wisdom for us to act on today. And Jim, it was an honor. It was a pleasure getting to know you. I look forward to having an ongoing relationship and doing some of those coffee laps that you were talking about.
All right, Jason. I enjoyed being with you this morning.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that's all we have time for here on the Jericho Force Podcast. We'll have all of Jim's contact information in our show notes, so don't you worry on that part. But how do we always end things? Kind of our riff off of Romans 12:2. Don't conform to the world's way of doing business. Transform by doing business God's way. We'll see you next time on the Jericho Force Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Jericho Force Podcast. You can catch us live on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and on demand. Check out jerichoforce.com/podcast for more details. To learn how to live out your faith in the marketplace, grab a copy of Jason Davis's book, Fortify, Being Rooted in God's Plan for Work and Business, available on Amazon.
You are listening to Jericho Force Worldwide Podcast.